Hey, good evening. Welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. Just looking at YouTube. What a wonderful thing YouTube is actually for, apart from the politics of it and how it affects us so-called creators with their rules and regulations and the way that they can enforce those rules and regulations, often to our detriment. But you can actually go into YouTube and find something about almost anything that's been made a video of, be it with just a written commentary, or you can find lectures and interviews that have been made about almost any subject, going into great detail, and it can be a great learning experience. Well, if you look at what's happening to us right now in the world, it's of interest to find out if there is some a great intelligent person who knows exactly what's going on. Now, this is what brings you slap up against what we should all be looking at, surely, and that is our own feeling, our own interpretation, clear of listening too much about what everybody says. Okay, there's all kinds of research done on everything. If you look at what's been going on right from when the world started to rebel, you had the religion, and religion really more or less ruled everything, taking us to war, keeping us at war. The Pope had his own army, still has his own army, still has his own city, his own country. The Vatican is a country, a sovereign country of great power and influence, probably one of the richest entities on the planet, and wielding great power and influence over us mere mortals, especially in Catholic countries like the Philippines. So if you look at all of that going on, and then there was some kind of realization happened, and they separated religion from science, and later they separated religion from the state and government and religion agreed to keep out of each other's face. And that, when that happened, then we started to go into what was called logic and reason. And that was where we worked out that if something, well, the scientists said this, that in order for something to be real, you had to be able to set up an experiment which would be so set in reality, three-dimensional reality. I'm trying not to make this any more complicated for my own benefit, otherwise I get lost. But instead of having where you had beliefs, which was more in the religious side of things, like believing in God or not, believing in the Holy Spirit, believing in the idea of a soul, believing in the idea that we are not physical beings, we are a combination of the spirit, soul, and the body, and the brain, and the mind, and all of those things combined make up a human being as we know it. Contested by a lot of people who don't believe in the Holy Spirit, but each to his own. But you had this where science said reality should be that you can set up an experiment which will prove a certain thing in realistic terms. How would they know whether it was realistic? Well, a real carefully controlled experiment should be repeatable. So he set up an experiment where you drop a ball, and the ball drops, and the speed can be measured, and it will drop every time like that. The same ball, same weight, same height. Drop it, it will behave in exactly the same way every time. That's reality. That's three-dimensional reality. That's what we can touch. That's this thing here, this flesh, this not material, physical stuff is in the third dimension, 3-dimension. Scientists generally doesn't acknowledge that there is anything other like a soul. They don't acknowledge that there is a spiritual being. They think that everything is brain controlled, and whether that's true or not is not for this real talk. What I really want to get to is the fact that when you started to have logic and reason, then it was very much three-dimensional, and if it couldn't be proved and time again, then it wasn't so. And that even went into human behavior. But then it started to change, and to cut a long story short, what we're at right now is the narrative, how words and expressed emotions within the words can change the way that we think. Now, it doesn't happen in a second. Sometimes you can talk to someone and you could talk to them all day or for weeks, and you still wouldn't be able to change the way that they think. But then if you think about the way that advertising works, now years and years ago they found the power of subliminal messages. Now, forgive me on the science, which I may be shaky on, but if you look at remember the old movies, Charlie Chaplin, when they first, Buster Keaton, the way they first started out, the Keystone Cops, they were all, everything was hyper, because they could only take so many images per second, and the cameras were not enough to be able to take enough to have smooth movement that was realistic. And then later, when they started to get, I think it was the difference between 8mm and 16mm. I could be wrong, you can correct me on that. But what happened was they developed a camera which could take enough images per second that would be equivalent to the human eye. So when that happened, you had a sense of reality when you watched movies. Now with movies, they learned very quickly that, let's say that you were taking 16 frames per second, you're not seeing 16, you're not seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in a second. You're seeing it as one moving image, but nevertheless it is composed of, say, I think 16 frames. 16 frames that if you separate any one, if you've ever seen a roll of film, you'll see that it's a series of single images. And when you put all of the images together, it forms a moving, natural looking scene. So once that was achieved, somebody had the bright idea of subliminal advertising, and it was banned because it was one in which, without the agreement or the analytical knowledge of the person who was viewing, he would not know that you were putting in his mind a command to do something, like buy the product, buy this product. But that's what they did for a little while. But then I believe that they banned that. But nevertheless, the subjects, the techniques of subliminal reasoning were still there, or subliminal conditioning. So if you could slip in a command when you were filming anything, you could actually influence the way that that person thought, the way that he was thinking. And one of those images, which would be reoccurring every so often, would actually put in his mind whatever the content of that image was. And if you said ABC, I don't know, if you said Acme, let's take it from Roadrunner, if you said Acme toothpaste is best, that is there and has command value. So when a person goes to the store and they're looking around, I need some toothpaste, what toothpaste do I need? And he looks in the rack, and there they all are, the ABC, ABC, D, E, F, and Acme. Ah, Acme, that's the one that's the best. And he would buy that. So now we've got the power of the word as established, even if it's in a sneaky way. So now, if you look at when you're watching television, you're in a very calm state, actually, one in which you're hardly thinking. That's why they call them couch potatoes. People who are just sitting on the couch and they have the remote control and they go zip, 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 and they look at all of these flashing images and they finally find something which in their area of boredom, or they decide that they'll stay with it. But if you look at the fact that you are in a state of being where you are very suggestible, shall I say, and a command can be made that's not based in any kind of reality at all. So now it brings us to the fact that the narrative, what is being said time and time again, is what is influencing our behavior. Now, I'm giving you the example of television because we all watch, or most of us watch, several hours of television a day. In the Philippines, in the morning, the television may be switched on, nobody listens to it, nobody's watching it, it's just going in the background. But if it's saying Acme toothpaste, Acme toothpaste, Acme toothpaste, that's actually having an impact on how you think about toothpaste. Now that's a really oversimplified example, and one that doesn't have a great impact on our life, because probably one toothpaste is pretty much the same as anybody else's. But get round to the fact that this unreality is something that we're being led to accept is reality. And on the subject even of toothpaste, the next time you watch a toothpaste ad where the person is cleaning their teeth, have a look, pay attention. They're advertising the use of toothpaste and they don't have any toothpaste on the brush, because unlike that beautiful model or handsome model with the perfect teeth that they are cleaning, there's nothing on that, and you are being led to believe that something is there, and you accept the idea that the toothpaste that they are marketing is going to clean your teeth like that one. But of course you'll have to put some toothpaste on there, and if you're anything like me, put a little bit of toothpaste on there, you end up almost looking as if you're frothing at the mouth. Nothing like that handsome guy or beautiful woman that's advertising the product on television, but that's the reality we accept for television. So now look at where we are right now. We're being given key phrases which almost in computer speak we've got these actual key words which are constantly being repeated in our lives. One of the ones that's being repeated right now that influences or certainly has the biggest impact or will have the biggest impact is the normal, the old normal. Remember the old normal? Remember the life that we used to have was called, now is being called the old normal. Now, what does that give way to? Oh, well, of course, the new normal. And that phrase has been introduced as if it's a valid prediction of the way that life is going to be. And we're not going to have certain things that we love and cherish in our lives anymore, is how it can be. And while all of this is going on, what is emerging as possibly what will be, no doubt, a major power on the planet will be China. How are China going to do it? They have put the most research into the narrative, and they're not prepared to play the game in the same way that it's been played before. At one time you loaded a rocket on something and you fired it off. It created a great deal of damage, killed people, destroyed property, and it was the writing on the wall for the next. If they didn't behave, if they didn't step up and fight you back, war. And that was how our bottom line was drawn, was the idea of going to war. Now, without getting into the whole thing about how people made so much money, or make so much money on the fact that we're at war. They're not going to war, by the way, but our sons and daughters are. Well, China is now doing things differently, and this marks the change in the way that the battles are being won. While we are squabbling about whether we're going to wear a mask or stay indoors, or whether we're going to behave ourselves and not go out on Monday if we're a senior, and only go out on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, won't be allowed in the bank anyway, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday we're supposed to be at home. And while we're arguing about all of this and about all of the trying to work out who to believe in all of these statistics that are being shown up by all of these various bodies, some of whom are not being allowed to tell their side of what they've learned. Some of the doctors, hundreds of them, are not being allowed to say, this is what we found to be the truth. But then you have these recognized bodies like the WHO, and they are coming and they're giving us their figures based on, well, who knows what, because we found that they haven't been telling us the truth in so many ways. So all of that is all going on, and China is off doing their stuff, and the stuff that they're doing is not good for the world overall. The entire thing is long gone and left behind the idea of conspiracy theory, when it's actually what has been signed up by something like 170 countries have now signed up into what will eventually be the United Nations One World Order. And all of this, you can sit there and say, and you're entitled to, you can sit there and say, where are your facts? the fact is that this is so important that you should be researching it yourself. And it's so easy to research it yourself because it's not being banned. It's not, they can't delete everything. They can't take everything down because somewhere someone will have shared it and said, look at this before they delete it, and share it. And then you shared it or they shared it and it all gets shared and it can't be stopped. So the good side of all of this is that all of this can't be stopped. But those who think that there are no facts to substantiate all of this need to go and look at it themselves. And what is actually happening right now is that our behavior, according to who controls the narrative, who can get out the repeated message that they want to get out. Well, governments with unlimited funds, relatively unlimited funds for doing this, can actually do it and influence our thinking. And it's very, very easy for this to happen. When any government wants any body that has, when I say a body, I mean any corporation, any great powerful body, the pharmaceutical industry for one thing is an extremely powerful entity at the moment that is taking things, taking us on a path that will not be any pleasure trip. And when all of that is put into place, it will almost be too late for us. We will have been groomed. I mentioned this once before. That grooming is one of those expressions that is there to describe what happens in the case of paedophiles. Oh, well, they groom the child so that the child is thinking in a way which will accommodate anything that these perverts want to do. But we are being groomed as well. When I said to you, I made the point of the phrase, the new normal, I doubt that there is anyone watching this that said, what's the new normal? What does he mean, the new normal? You all knew the new normal. It's all been up there by someone who is not elected and is there by virtue of the power of his money and where it's all come from. There's a whole sub-society that's going on that is there, and it's manipulating the way that our lives are going to go. But you can find out what is happening. Now, when I was working at one time in the UK, I was working as a contractor, and in the UK they have various problems with damp. It's a different climate there, and houses suffer from damp, and the damp it can have a particular thing called dry rot, and dry rot will have a flower. It will have this fungus that will grow. Now, on occasions I would be called in to handle that, and what I found was that if you had a flower like this on the skirting board, it was only going to be something like 1/10 of what is really there. So I would know that, you know, just a small flower, a lot of bad news for that house owner. And this is also, what is it, the tip of the iceberg. Say that the iceberg, as big as it may seem above, 9/10 of it is below. So as soon as you realize that the way that we are being led to think is not by chance, and depending on what input you allow into your life, you will be influenced to think in a certain way. And if you are led to believe that this pandemic is going to kill everybody if we're not careful, then of course you go along with anything in terms of loss of liberties like we have now. We don't have churches. There are no churches anymore like we used to have. We don't go to service. We don't congregate with friends more than just a few, and then we're not allowed to actually touch. And we wear a mask, which dehumanizes us, because how can you know? We had 2 visitors a couple of weeks ago, 2 of our students, and when I arrived and got out of the car, I said hello to these 2 people that were there, and I actually didn't recognize them because they've got masks on. And it was only later that Beth said, I said, and their names, and she said, well, it's nice, and John, well, how would I know if, and this is what's supposed to happen. So all of that is happening right now. So we're being groomed to accept this huge loss of liberties, loss of human contact, and we are being groomed for that. Now, you don't have to take any of this as gospel. You can look it up. I looked up here, had a reference, it said applied postmodernism. And I looked up, I put that in YouTube, applied postmodernism. Video after video after video after video tells me about postmodernism. And you can learn what has been said. That's just one there as it's applied to our behavior. And postmodernism is just one of the things going into, as I said, logic and reason. And then later we all started to have our own opinion, and because of the internet we're able to publish that. Like now I'm posting and going public with something that I've concluded from the information that I've been reading. So it's important that for those who are interested in how our world is going at the moment, it's important that you do your own research. Don't have to listen to what I'm saying as if that's the end, nor do I have to prove to you that everything that I'm saying is absolutely gospel. You are free and have the responsibility for yourself. What's the saying? Buyer beware. Well, we're buying into a way of life which is not going to be a fun place to be. A lot of people are going to are suffering greatly. And the more people that listen to what's going on, watch what's going on, and actually take a stand, the better. So, thanks for listening while I witter on. I hope some of it makes some sense to enough of you that you're prepared to look. That's if you can listen to what's been said now and not disbelieve, not say, oh, I don't believe that. If you can say, what's being said in this video is important enough to find out in the same way that I did. This is my little research that I did today, because I was sent a link by someone, and it was the frontier, the missed frontier, and it dealt with, one of the subjects was postmodernism, and that was one of the moving parts of the video, of the lecture, of the interview. And it was enough for me to say, maybe I should know something more about this. And that's when I found out, and it made total sense to me, that we are being groomed. I've thought that on my own. I've thought we are being groomed to accept a really impossible situation without even going into the biblical. The mark of the beast is already being freely accepted. That little chip that's going to go in. And if they can talk about mandatory medical invasions of our sovereign bodies, they talk about it, say, oh, it's not going to happen. But they talk about it. Mandatory, mandatory, mandatory. Now we're saying, is it going to be mandatory? The word should never come up in relation to this. But it does, because we've had it repeated, repeated, repeated. And whoever, as the Chinese, are now firmly set on the path of whoever has the power of the narrative has the power to change behavior. And they're working right now on making all of us feel better about communism, about the Marxist way of living. Not for me. Do your research. Thanks for all. Bye for now.